Hello everyone, this is Warhawk Beyond 2040 and welcome to another edition of the Superman and Lois Season 3 review series. And today I'm going to be talking about episode 7, Forever and Always, which I have just finished watching. And this episode showed me that you don't always need tons of action to be invested. If you've got a good solid cast, good characters, and good dialogue, and top notch writing, you can do just about anything. And this episode, although it didn't feature Superman, there was plenty of Clark Kent, which was a good thing. This episode really cemented the fact that Superman and Lois is the best DC show, period. And, you've heard me in the past say how much I love the show, how every episode continues to keep getting better and better, which I still stand by that. But I thought with this episode, it was very emotional, very well told in terms of the story aspects, and good drama. I absolutely enjoyed this episode a lot, and I thought everybody just did a, an amazing job in their performances. I felt invested with everyone, and there was no dull moments, and there was no action. I'm not saying that I didn't miss seeing Superman doing his thing, but the story was so good and so enriched with emotion that I didn't even notice that Superman wasn't even there. I didn't even see Clark suit up, you know. That's how good this episode really was, and I loved it. I just thought this was one of the best episodes of season 3 so far. I thought this was really good, and it really captured the family dynamics from the Kents, the Irons, and the Mannheims, which I'm going to get into in a moment. But this really showcased how important family is. And I thought the message it delivered in this episode was very powerful. I thought it did a great job in bringing that message across. And, you know, as I said, when you've got good writing behind you, you can do absolutely anything. And it really shows you how much the writers care about the show, how they care about the characters, and more importantly, they care about the audience because I really cared about everyone. You want Lois to get better. You want Clark and Lois to be happy. You want the boys to be happy. You want everyone to be happy and you want everything to work out for the best. And I thought this episode really tugged on my heartstrings a lot, and when a show does that, they're doing something right. So, anyway, as always, I am going to give a quick recap of what's happened so far, and then after that, we're going to get straight into talking about episode 7. So, as we saw previously in episode 6, we see Clark joined a support group for chemo patient spouses, and we also got to see Lois sharing a meal with one of the patients who is in Mannheim's philanthropy, and we also see Jordan trying to convince his dad that he is ready to help and make a difference. And we also see in this episode, we see Kyle and Chrissy finally go public with their relationship. And we also see the identity of Onomatope was finally revealed, who turned out to be Pia, who is the wife of Bruno Mannheim. And we also saw at the end of that episode that Mannheim promises he will do everything he can to save her. So that was quite an interesting way to end episode 6. We've been wondering about who Onomatope really is, and we learned that it's none other than Bruno Mannheim's wife, Pia. So I thought that was a very interesting twist on the way things played out. So, with that all said, let's not waste any more time. Let's get straight into it. Let's talk about episode 7 Forever and Always. So, we kick off episode 7 with Lois vomiting in the toilet as her condition begins to get worse, and Clark can only do one thing to help her, and that's be by her side as much as he can. This leads to an existential pain for both the boys, mainly Jonathan, who sees the humanity of the situation even more than everyone else. As we move along through this episode, we finally get to learn the backstory of Bruno Mannheim and his wife Pia as we delve into their past and we get to see how they first met each other. And we learn that Pia and Bruno have known each other since childhood, so we begin to get a better understanding of why Bruno Mannheim is so obsessed with saving his wife. We then go back to the present where Lois questions Pia, which almost causes a rift between the two ladies. So Clark goes to question Bruno Mannheim instead, not as Superman, but as reporter Clark Kent. And this is something we haven't really seen very much in Superman and Lois. We've seen it in a couple of flashbacks over the course of the series, but we've not really seen it in the present. So actually seeing Clark Kent in reporter mode was, a real change of pace. As we saw last time, Clark confronted Bruno Mannheim as Superman, but this time he's getting into the heart of the matter as Clark Kent, the reporter. So this was a nice change of scene. So we see Clark grill Mannheim and trying to get him to lose his cool, which results in Clark realizing that Bruno is actually doing everything he can to save his wife. And we also see in this episode Jonathan and Jordan go to the Fortress of Solitude and try to communicate with Clark's Kryptonian mother, Lara, to try and find out if there's any Kryptonian technology that could cure Lois from cancer, because they both feel, more so Jonathan, that Clark isn't doing enough to save their mother. Clark confronts both boys and tells them that he is doing everything he can to try and save his mother. Once the boys go home, they find end of life documents that Lois has written up in the event that Lois could pass away. Jonathan finally confronts his parents about it, and hope is not an absolute. And we get into some very personal things where Jonathan pretty much buries Clark about the whole concept of hope. And I thought this was a very powerful scene, with Jonathan, Clark, Lois, and Jordan. As Jonathan is just very upset. He feels helpless and he's just bearing his soul here. So I thought this was a very powerful scene. And again, as I said, you don't necessarily need a lot of action to tell the story. All you need is just good characters and good dialogue and good writing. We also see Sarah dealing with the reality that Chrissy and her dad are dating. And we also see Sarah bonding with her mum after Lana admits that she is having trouble moving on with her life now that the divorce has come through. Lana Lang, I'm a fan of Lana Lang, don't get me wrong. I've loved Lana Lang from the comic books and in animation, and even in Smallville as well. Although that was kind of a double edged sword, depending on what you watch, really. But Lana in Superman and Lois, nothing against the actress, but I'm not a great fan of the way Lana is written at times. Yes, she's a good mother, but at times I feel like she's a bit of a nosy so and so. She just doesn't seem to keep her nose out of people's business, and she seems to have this knack of always making everything about herself. And I'm not a fan of that. Nothing against the actress, just not really keen on the way Lana is written. That's just the only takeaway for me from this episode. So we see Mateo comes to Smallville to have lunch with Natalie and John Henry, and we see John Henry going to full on overprotective dad mode. Boy, oh boy, he'll be in for a big surprise when he learns the true identity of Mateo. So I thought this was a nice scene as well. I admit that John Henry was a little bit over the top, being overprotective dad mode, but that's normal. And we got to see Lana and John Henry have a bit more chemistry, so it looks like they're trying to push for something with those two. Time will tell, really. And we finally got to see John Henry get out of his box and actually interact with a few other people, not just Lois and Clark all the time. We've seen him interact with Lana a bit here and there, but this was actually the first time that we got to see both of them actually have a proper scene together, and it worked. So after a whole series of flashbacks with Bruno Mannheim and his wife Pia, we're then taken back to the present, and we see their son arrive, who turns out to be none other than Matteo. Matteo is Bruno Mannheim's son, and he says to his mum and dad that I've finally met someone. She could be the one, and I really want you to meet her. And that's how we end episode 7. Overall, a fantastic episode, one of the best episodes of season 3 so far. And like I said at the beginning, you don't really need action to tell a good story. All you need is good characters, a solid cast, and great writing. And this episode had all of that. The Lana stuff was the only takeaway from this episode, but it didn't bother me that much. But overall, I thought this was a very powerful and emotional episode. And I loved that we finally got into the backstory of the Mannheims. I thought this was definitely the highlight of this episode. And you really get to see another side of Bruno Mannheim, that he's not just some evil crime boss who runs Intergang. There's a human side to him as well. He does care for certain people, and he'll do anything to protect those certain people he cares about, no matter the cost. So I thought that was highlighted very well and throughout this episode. So that's going to be it for me. I am going to wrap this up now. What was your thoughts on episode 7? Did you enjoy it? What did you think of the backstory of Bruno Mannheim and his wife Pia? Do you understand why Bruno Mannheim wants to save his wife so much? Did you think they did a good job in showcasing his human side? And also, what about Jonathan's feelings about Lois's cancer? Do you think he's justified in his anger? Do you think he was in the right to be very upset about Lois writing her own will? And also, what was your thoughts on the ending with Matteo being a Mannheim? Did you see this coming? Were you surprised? Or did you know he was a Mannheim already? You know what to do, guys. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave your thoughts and comments down below, and I will see all of you next time for another edition of the Superman and Lois Season 3 review series, where I am going to be talking about episode 8, which I am very much looking forward to talking about and seeing, especially with the way this entire episode played out and the way it's ended. It's going to be a good one, and I can't wait. So until next time, take care, everybody, and stay safe. And once again, as always, much appreciated. Thanks for listening.